There is only one spot in the academy this year, and I had a hard time getting it for you. If Michael can't make it, I'll go talk to him. You two have a good relationship, so 3 to 5 years won't hurt. Looking at the application form the professor handed me, my hands couldn't stop shaking. In my previous life, I was married to Michael for 40 years and raised a son and a daughter. I thought this was a perfect life. But it wasn't until Michael passed away that I found the box of letters and photos when I was sorting out his belongings. I just found out that he had a first love, who was the biological daughter of my adoptive parents. In 1984, it was he who hid my application to study abroad just to give her the opportunity. From then on, I became a housewife, and he became a returned professor. Even my son wrote their story into a play, just to praise their restrained and tolerant love. When I opened my eyes again, I went back to the day when I received the application to study abroad. Professor, I will definitely go study abroad. The story is about to begin. If you like it, remember to like and subscribe. This is the only spot in the academy this year. I fought hard to get it for you. Olivia, please don't be confused. If Michael can't make it, I'll go talk to him. You two have a good relationship, so 3 to 5 years won't hurt. Looking at the application form that the professor handed me, my hands couldn't stop shaking. I was reborn. The professor beside me didn't realize that something was wrong with me, and continued to persuade me earnestly. I know you two have just gotten married and are inseparable, but don't worry, Professor. I will definitely go. After saying that, I sat back in my seat and quickly filled out the form. The professor looked shocked, then asked tentatively, usually when you go to other places to inspect ancient buildings, Michael always accompanies you. Are you sure you don't need to go back and discuss such an important matter with him? Everyone thought Michael loved me. Even I thought so in my previous life. I shook my head and handed the completed form to the professor with a smile. Since we are husband and wife, he must want me to become better. I will tell him when I get back. Professor, please keep it a secret for me. The professor then smiled with relief, agreed repeatedly, and locked the application back in the cabinet. Walking out of the teaching building, I breathed a sigh of relief. In this life, I will never be bound by Michael's love again. In my previous life, I also applied to study abroad, but was rejected. I thought it was because I was pregnant, so I didn't take it seriously and went home to take my leave to prepare for the birth of my baby. But just like that, I was trapped by my family all my life. It was not until after Michael's death that I discovered when I was sorting out his belongings that he had never submitted the application form for me. Michael wanted to give up the opportunity to study abroad to Bella, the biological daughter of my adoptive parents. After that, Michael repeatedly hid it from me and took Bella's daughter abroad to see her. Even my son secretly interacted with them without telling me. Even after Michael's death, his son wrote their story into a script in his own voice, telling the camera that his father had spent his entire life regretting not being brave enough when he was young. After looking at the yellowed photo, Michael wrote 4 powerful words, "Love of my life." That's when I woke up. It turns out that my whole life has been a complete joke. When I nearly had a hemorrhage during childbirth, my husband was trying to figure out how to persuade me to keep Bella's daughter Carol by my side. While I was worried about him going out on a mission, he took Carol across half the world to reunite with Bella, even ignoring his own son. After Bella returned to China, he lied to me that his comrades had died and he had to take care of orphans and widows, and gave most of his monthly salary to her. Everyone is singing the praises of their regretful and restrained love. But no one ever thought that I would be kept in the dark my whole life and become a fig leaf for their immoral behavior. And there are the Bella family parents who adopted me from the orphanage. It was obvious that Bella got lost because she was playing too much, and they adopted me from the orphanage in order to comfort Bella's devastated mother. But later on, I became arrogant and domineering, occupying Bella's home and trying to monopolize everything of hers. Even though I moved out as soon as I got a job, and even after Bella came home, I canceled the engagement I had made with Tony. I even paid back all the money that the Bella family had spent on my studies over the years. But everyone still blames me for everything Bella lost, and exploits me with a clear conscience. Even Michael married me only because he was afraid that my entanglement with Tony would make Bella sad. After Tony's death, Michael's heartache for Bella reached its peak. So, Michael agreed that Bella's daughter Carol would call him dad, and he also agreed that Bella used my design draft to get the opportunity to study abroad. Because Michael felt that I owed Bella. And Bella needs this opportunity more than I do. When I got home, my clothes were soaked by the rain. Michael and Bella were sitting on the sofa watching a big color TV. They were talking and laughing while discussing the plot. Carol was playing with toys nearby. The shoes were not taken off, leaving a large dark brown stain on the sofa. Seeing me standing at the door in a mess, Michael panicked a little and quickly got up and got a dry towel from the bathroom to help me wipe. I stepped back. His hand paused as it missed, then he spoke softly and gently to comfort her. Why didn't you wait for me to pick you up on a rainy day? I just told Bella that I would go look for you if you didn't come back. Yes, sister. Carol and I were trapped at work just now. If Mr. Michael hadn't arrived in time, we would have been in the same situation as you. Bella followed suit, but her tone was full of boasting. Really? He was obviously my husband, but when the rainstorm came, he went to pick her up first, completely forgetting my existence. No wonder she is so proud. I raised my head and tried hard to suppress the moisture in my eyes, then took the towel and wiped them. It's okay. It suddenly started raining halfway through the journey and there was no place for you to call. Michael was a little surprised at my calmness. He looked at me carefully and frowned before asking. Are you angry? Olivia, I just picked you up Bella on the way, could you please stop being unreasonable? Besides, you originally owed Bella. If it weren't for you, she wouldn't have to raise a child alone at such a young age. She is your sister, so we should help her if we can. Oh. I sneered. It was Bella who cried and made a fuss about marrying Tony, and now she's blaming me for being a widow? Do they think that as long as they come up with this excuse, I will make endless concessions? Glancing at the still smug Bella, I spoke calmly. When my parents said they would find you someone better, it was you who insisted on marrying Tony, even risking your own reputation to drug him. Otherwise, how could he have taken the initiative to apply for transfer to a remote area? Now that he's sacrificed, you blame me for leaving you a widow? I didn't hire anyone to get you lost, and I moved to the school dormitory immediately after you came back. I really can't figure out what I owe you. Besides, didn't Michael give you all his monthly salary? Even the house allocated by his company was occupied by you, and I never made a fuss. Hearing this, Bella's face froze. It seemed like he didn't expect me to say it so directly. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, then turned her gaze to Michael, stammered and opened her mouth. I didn't kill Tony. When Michael saw her crying, he subconsciously turned around and was about to walk towards her, but when he saw that I was just standing there looking at him coldly, he stopped abruptly. Seeing Bella so aggrieved, Michael seemed to be very distressed and scolded me again. I never thought you could be so vicious. No one expected Tony to get into an accident, and Bella is also a victim. How can you blame her? I was so angry that I laughed out loud. Did Michael forget what he just said? It was clearly him who put the blame on me, and now that I'm just stating the facts, both of them can't bear it? Bella's eyes were red. Forget it, Mr. Michael, I shouldn't have come back in the first place, otherwise it would be my sister and Tony who got married. As she spoke, tears streamed down her cheeks. She gritted her teeth and hugged the dazed Carol, ready to leave. Bella. Michael shouted anxiously, grabbed her arm, looked at me with a hint of blame and said. Can't you say less? Where do you want her to go in such heavy rain? I pulled the corner of my mouth and continued, isn't this how I came back? When Bella heard what I said, she struggled to shake off Michael's hand. The entrance of the dormitory building assigned by the school is already narrow, and now, with 3 people squeezed in, it is even harder to turn around. I moved back and watched the two of them fighting coldly. Michael changed his usual gentleness and said with a red face, how can Bella be like you? She suffered so much since she was a child. Now she finally comes back and has to take care of a child alone. You are a woman yourself, how come you have no sympathy at all? I looked at his red eyes and felt a little dazed for a moment. In my previous life, I always raised my children alone. Everyone revolves around Bella. I have to take care of my son and both sides of my parents by myself, and there are always big and small things waiting for me to deal with. The two of them spent their lives traveling and having fun. I felt a sudden pain in my chest, so I pressed it with my hand, looked up at Michael and said, well, I sympathize with Bella, so you can send her back to your house now, and then give her next month's salary. If you want to leave, leave quickly. If Miss Emily next door wakes up, your story will spread tomorrow. After saying that, I didn't care about their reactions and went into the bathroom. In this life, I just want to live for myself. After a while, Michael's vague voice came from the door. It's raining too hard. I'll take Bella home first. You go to bed early. I'll be back later. The sound of water mixed with the clear sound of the wooden door opening and closing came into my ears. The pain in my heart was now gone without any ripples. I was almost done with my shower and change of clothes when I took a thick book off the top shelf. This is my savings over the years. Michael gave most of his salary to Bella and the rest to his mother. Our expenses are basically covered by my salary. Even this house was allocated to me by the school after I became a professor's assistant. I took out the few banknotes I had and stuffed them all into my pocket, then I went to bed contentedly. From today on, Michael, it's none of my business who you choose to be the savior of. The next morning, Michael came back with dark circles under his eyes. He looked at me and said coldly, "What you said last night was too harsh. Bella cried all night and refused to live in my house no matter what I said. Come with me to apologize to her later. Is breakfast ready? I'll take it with me." He opened his mouth and was about to continue speaking, but he saw that I was pale and leaning weakly on the sofa. Michael was a little flustered, reached out and touched my forehead, and said anxiously, "Why didn't you tell me you had such a fever?" I brushed his hand away, lowered my head and took a sip of water to suppress the bitterness of the medicine in my mouth. In the past few years of marriage, I have been taking care of his daily life in every possible way, and sometimes I even have to prepare for Bella. But now I don't want to do anything. My marriage with him was a calculation from the beginning, and it's time to end it. Seeing that I didn't speak, Michael hesitated for a few seconds and then spoke. "For the recent competition, can you give your spot to Bella?" I looked at him in disbelief. He seemed a little embarrassed, his eyes flickering, and he didn't dare to meet my gaze. I said with red eyes, "Do you know what you are saying? Apart from how important this competition is to me, have you ever thought that even if I withdraw and give her the spot, she still won't win the prize? Bella's talent was not high to begin with, and her grades in all subjects in college were only average. She couldn't even make it past the preliminary round of this kind of architectural competition. Not to mention winning awards." Michael obviously knew what I meant. He pursed his lips and stammered, "So what Bella and I mean is, using your design." Before he could finish, I refused and said, "Don't even think about it. I finally understand why it was Bella who went abroad to study in the previous life. It is likely that Michael stole my design and recommended it to the professor." Michael was not angry when I rejected him. He just put his arm around my shoulders and straightened me up. He looked straight at me and said word by word, "Olivia, just this once, okay? Even if we compensate her in the end, I promise you, I won't care no matter what happens to her afterwards. If you hadn't been adopted, you wouldn't have had such good conditions to study, and you wouldn't have had the opportunity to participate in the competition, right? We are just giving Bella's spot back to her." The prolonged high fever, coupled with the effect of the antipyretic medicine, made me a little fuzzy. I used up my last bit of strength to throw off his shackles and said loudly, "I can't possibly give in. I have worked so hard for this qualification, and I can't give it to anyone else." When Bella came back, my parents used all their connections to get her into college. She received the same education as me, there was no such thing as me taking her place. If you want to help her without any bottom line, I have no objection, but don't involve me. When I woke up again, it was already late at night. Michael lay on the bed with a tired look on his face, one hand still tightly holding my hand, as if he was afraid that he wouldn't know I woke up. I was a little dazed. In fact, Michael and I also had a happy married life. At that time, he would pick me up from school after get off work, and would always bring all kinds of snacks that I had loved since I was a child. He rode his bike to take me home, and we chatted about everything along the way. The conditions in the orphanage were poor and I have been weak since childhood. After getting married, he fell ill every other day. This was his usual behavior at that time. As soon as I moved, he woke up immediately. But who would have thought that such a gentle and considerate man did everything for another woman? I took a deep breath. Michael raised his head sharply upon noticing my movement. "Are you awake? How do you feel now? You scared me this morning, but luckily your fever is gone now." As he said this, he reached out to touch my head. I turned my head slightly to avoid his touch. Michael saw my resistance, slowly withdrew his hand, and said awkwardly, "Go back to sleep. I didn't think things through today. I'll take you to the mall to buy you some gifts and apologize to you tomorrow when I'm rested. Okay? Please forgive me just this once." As he spoke, he tucked the corner of the quilt in for me, and without waiting for my answer, he picked up the quilt from the cupboard and walked to the next room. Even though he said that, I didn't let my guard down. After all, he has Bella behind him who is directing him to charge into battle. She would not give up this opportunity so easily. The next day, Michael got off work early and took me to the department store. I didn't have anything to buy, but there weren't many opportunities to spend Michael's money, so I might as well take this opportunity to buy some supplies for the future. "Carol, does this dress look good on Mom?" "It looks good. Michael's dad will definitely like it when Mom wears it like this. Shall we go to Michael's dad's house for dinner tonight?" As soon as I entered the door, a familiar voice rang in my ears. Michael's stride was visibly stunned. Bella was seen wearing a crimson coat with long curly hair hanging behind her ears, looking very much like one of the popular entertainment stars recently. She also saw me, her almond eyes curved, and she said with a smile. "What a coincidence, Mr. Michael, your sister is here to buy clothes too." I nodded, ignored her provocation, randomly picked out a few pieces of clothes that suited me and handed them to the clerk. Just as Michael was about to go forward to pay the bill, Carol hugged his legs. "Michael, Daddy buys clothes for Mom, don't buy them for Auntie. Auntie is mean, she's always mean to me. Don't buy them for Auntie." The crying became louder and louder, attracting many people to gather here. "Carol, stop talking nonsense." Bella symbolically pulled Carol's hand, with no intention of stopping her at all. "Dad just wants to buy clothes for Mom, doesn't he?" Carol didn't say anything nonsense. Carol raised her head and looked at me stubbornly, her hands still clinging to Michael's legs tightly. I smiled and looked at Bella. "In that case, buy it for me. Anyway, my husband's salary is all given to you." Michael looked at me in shock, his mouth wide open in disbelief, unable to believe that I was saying these words in public. In the past, my personality was such that no matter how big the problem was, I would just go home and talk about it behind closed doors. But now he completely disregards his face. I shifted my gaze slightly. "What? Did I say something wrong?" "Oh, yeah, look at my memory, you gave her all the cash too." In the end, Bella couldn't stand the pointing and talking of the people around her anymore, so she covered Carol's still yelling mouth, quickly paid the bill and left. I turned around and left with my clothes in my hand, feeling satisfied. Michael followed me silently all the way, looking me up and down from time to time. I could clearly feel his eyes fixed on me. But I just pretend he doesn't exist. I bought some daily necessities and then went home with my bags full. As the day got closer to the competition, I got off work later and later. Michael started picking me up again, which was a rare occurrence. As soon as we got home that day, there was a knock on the door. Michael looked at me guiltily, ran to the door quickly and opened it. "Mr. Michael, the house was repossessed, and now Carol and I have no place to live. Can you let me stay here for one night? I'll go out and find a house to move to tomorrow." Michael moved sideways to let Bella into the house, and took Carol into his arms, carrying a huge snakeskin luggage bag in one hand and ready to bring her into the house. I coughed lightly. The two men paused. Bella immediately turned to me, her eyes filled with tears, and spoke sadly. "Sister, I really have nowhere to go. You know the Tony family has been blaming me and won't let Carol and I in. Now the only person I can look for is Mr. Michael. Don't quarrel with Mr. Michael because of me. If you don't want me to, I'll leave now." I crossed my arms and looked at Michael with amusement. He had clearly discussed this matter long ago but was now pretending to be unaware of it. A lot of people knew about what happened in the department store last time. There weren't enough houses to go around in the company, and many people were eyeing them. Michael used it to support women. No wonder it was reported. I waved my hand indifferently, went back to my room, closed the door, and blocked out the annoying crying sound. People have already come in, so I don't have the right to refuse. Then why should I be the bad guy? After all, I might have to rely on her to get a divorce. Perhaps they had been warned by Michael, as Bella and Carol had been staying in the guest room these past few days, except for eating. I spent a few days in peace and tranquility. I was busy preparing the design draft for the weekend competition, hoping to get better results when applying to study abroad. Just when I thought nothing would happen again. But when I got home from get off work, I found that all the design drafts that were piled on the top shelf of the cabinet had been turned out. Many of them had been torn into pieces and thrown everywhere. Carol just sat on the sofa, still tearing the paper with her hands. My mind exploded with a buzzing sound. "What are you doing?" I snatched the design draft from her hand. She was startled by my sudden action, pouted her lips and burst into tears. "Bad Auntie hit me." Bella was attracted by the crying sound and quickly walked to the living room and hugged Carol in her arms. "Sister, Carol is just a child. Why can't you just say something nicely instead of resorting to violence?" I threw the mess of papers in front of her. "Why didn't you tell me what she did? Did you know that there are designs in here that I'm going to participate in a competition this weekend? This is my home. You moved my things in my home and you turned the tables and accused me of hitting her?" Bella patted the child on the back and looked at me with a mocking expression. "Carol is only 4 years old. Can she lie? Even if I lie, if I say you can hit me, then I'll hit you. Mr. Michael will only believe me. So what if it's your home? I'm moving in anyway, and this will be my home sooner or later. With that, Bella turned around and tried to leave, with Carol still leaning on her shoulder and making faces at me. I was so angry that my whole body was shaking. I went up to her and grabbed her, wanting to argue with her. Unexpectedly, she pushed me hard with her hand, and I staggered and fell backwards. The sofa in the living room is made entirely of the most primitive logs. I hit my head on it and felt severe pain all over my body. Then I felt a sticky liquid flowing down my cheek. Bella seemed to be frightened as well. She didn't even pay attention to Carol's screams and just stood there stupidly. I held my forehead and stood up with difficulty. At this time, a group of people had gathered at the door. When Ms. Emily from next door saw that my face was covered in blood, she rushed in immediately. "What's wrong with you? Olivia took you in out of kindness, why are you repaying her with hatred?" Bella waved her hands in panic. "It wasn't me, she started it first." I sneered. "Do you see any injuries on her body? How did she, a child less than 1 meter tall, get the box on the top shelf?" Bella paused for breath and rolled her eyes around, wanting to argue but not knowing how to say it. Michael and I were both at work, so it was just her and Carol at home. Who else could it be if not her? No one paid any attention to her strange behavior and helped me rush to the clinic. Ms. Emily was cursing as she walked, and her voice was so loud that it could be heard across the street. That night, Michael came with Bella's father and Bella's mother. Seeing that my head was wrapped tightly, his frown relaxed and he sat beside my bed and comforted me softly. "How could you be so careless?" I was almost scared to death when I heard it. Even though his soul was gone, he still knew to go and ask for help first. "I see you are quite sober." Michael waved to the door, and Bella and Carol walked in immediately. "Carol, can you please apologize to your aunt?" Michael coaxed the little girl softly and pushed her towards my bed. Unexpectedly, when Carol saw my expression, she started crying again. The heart-wrenching cry echoed throughout the ward, but there was not a single tear on her face. Michael felt so distressed that he held her in his arms and turned to me and said, "Don't get angry with a little kid. I apologize on her behalf. She was really scared just now. If you hadn't hit her first, she wouldn't have pushed you, right?" I listened with great interest as he distorted right and wrong. It seems that the truth has taken a roundabout way out of Bella's mouth again. She is really good at making herself clear. Bella's father also agreed. "That's right, Olivia, you didn't suffer any serious injuries, so I think forget it, and let Michael take you back later." I ignored them and just looked at Bella. "You deliberately destroyed my design so that I can't participate in the competition, right?" Michael glanced at Bella, opened his mouth and didn't know what to say, then closed it again after a while. Bella's father's face darkened. "What do you mean by intentional? If we hadn't trained you so well, would you have had the opportunity to participate in these competitions? Now Carol just broke it accidentally because she was having fun, and you are forcing Bella like this? Olivia, we have raised you for nothing for so many years. We have developed feelings for a dog." Even without Bella taking any action, there were always people stepping forward to help her charge into battle. Talking to them is really a waste of energy. No matter what you say, they'll all end up blaming it on me owing Bella. I've had doubts before. Do I really owe her something? After all, I have enjoyed a life that did not belong to me for so many years. But if I could live my life over again, I would never have such thoughts. Even without me, the Bella family would adopt someone else. For them, their daughter is just a tool to curry favor with Tony's family. Only in this way can they get a position in the army for their son. I did receive a good education thanks to the resources of the Bella family. But it is undeniable that everything I have now is the result of my own efforts. I would also like to repay their kindness. But never at the expense of yourself. After the group of people left, Michael and I were the only ones left in the room. Michael looked at me and explained to me word by word in a rare serious manner. "I know Carol lied, but she is a child after all. If I expose her in front of so many people, it will definitely leave a trauma. I promise you that I will find a house for them as soon as possible, and we can live a good life from now on." "Oh," I responded and lay down on the bed. Then, as if she remembered something, she turned to look at him and said, "Bella said today that you only trust her, and that it will be her home in the future." Michael was stunned, and immediately started jumping up and down in anxiety as if I had found something wrong with him. "Don't listen to her nonsense. I only take care of her for Tony's sake. We grew up together. How can she compare to you?" As if to convince himself, he spoke louder and louder. I nodded and said, "Oh." If it was in my previous life, I would have been extremely happy to hear him say this. But now I know he can't do it. Even if he wanted to, Bella wouldn't let him go easily. All night long, Michael sat in his chair and stared at me. I could sense he had something to say, but what did it have to do with me? I don't want to listen. I returned home early the next morning. As soon as Ms. Emily saw me, she immediately put down her work and came over to greet me. How are you? You look fine. I smiled and nodded and said, thank you for sending me to the health center, otherwise I would probably have anemia. Seeing that I was still in the mood to joke, she felt relieved, looked around, leaned over to whisper in my ear. Your man came back this morning and had a big fight with your sister. From what I heard, he asked her to move out immediately. I was surprised. I didn't expect that he could be so cruel. I thanked Miss Emily again and walked in. The room was still a mess, with torn pieces of paper everywhere. Bella sat in front of the dining table in a daze. Are you satisfied? My eyelids moved but I didn't say anything. Don't think you've won. Why do you take over everything I have and live better than me? It should be you who should marry that short-lived Tony, and I who should marry Mr. Michael. I can't possibly move away. I don't know why she has to blame me for her failure in life. Obviously, every choice was made by her. I wasn't even qualified to object. He put the medicine on the table and looked at her with some pity. Michael said last night that he only took care of you for Tony's sake, and he also said that there was no way he would divorce me. Bella's fingers pressed on the table turned slightly white, and her lips were bitten tightly, and a few drops of blood could be vaguely seen oozing out. The hatred in her eyes could no longer be concealed. I know. With a personality like hers, she will definitely take an unconventional approach. Michael acted quickly and found a house in the afternoon and started to prepare for Bella's move. When I woke up from my sleep, the room had been cleaned. Michael is busy in the kitchen. This is the first time I see him cooking. As if sensing that I was looking at him, he turned around holding the spatula and said to me with a smile. Go sit on the sofa for a while, I'll be ready soon. I responded and turned towards the couch. Before I could sit down, there was a rapid knock on the door. Mr. Michael, please go check on Carol. Carol has a high fever and she vomits everything she eats. Please help me. I really don't know what to do. Bella cried as she spoke. I have to say, Bella is very beautiful. It was the kind of bright and majestic beauty, but now she is crying so hard that even I feel heartbroken. I gave up my seat at the door and went back to sit on the sofa. Michael came out of the kitchen after hearing the noise, frowned and said, if you are sick, go to the hospital. I am not a doctor. Probably because it was the first time that she was rejected by Michael, Bella seemed a little overwhelmed and stood at the door sobbing. After an unknown amount of time, Michael was defeated. He picked up his clothes and shouted at me, Olivia, eat first, I will be back soon. But I know. He can't come back. The figures of the two people were getting farther and farther away until they disappeared. When I got home after the game, it was already the afternoon of the third day. Michael was sitting at the door smoking, with cigarette butts piled up on the ground in front of him. After not seeing him for a few days, he looked much more decadent and even had a beard growing out. I took out my key and opened the door. Did you know this a long time ago? Michael's hoarse and deep voice sounded behind me. I raised an eyebrow but didn't answer. Of course I knew that Carol wasn't sick that day. Bella just wanted to find an excuse to trick her and then use the same trick she used on Tony to deal with Michael. But so what? That's a good thing for me. Otherwise, I don't know when I will be able to divorce this protected marriage. I can't afford to waste time. Michael saw what I was thinking, pressed his eyebrows in pain, his eyes bloodshot. No wonder you don't argue with me anymore, and you don't care that Bella and I are close. You've wanted to divorce me for a long time, right? Are you blaming me for not standing by your side before? Or for giving all my salary to Bella? Or for treating Carol as my own child and letting her call me dad? We agreed to live a good life together. Can you give me another chance? I looked up in surprise. Isn't this what he always regretted in his previous life? Why is he not happy now that it has come true? No. Michael put his hands into his hair in pain and choked up and said, I really didn't think it would come to this. I really regret. I suddenly thought of my child in my previous life. It was at this time that Michael deliberately made me pregnant so that I could feel at ease at home. He mentioned more than once in Michael's confession that his father's biggest regret was his lack of courage when he was young. But now, isn't that what Michael wanted? Why do you regret it again? 3 days before I was leaving the country, Michael and I got our divorce certificate. After going out, he walked towards Bella in an almost embarrassed manner. Looking at her defiant and proud expression, I turned and left expressionlessly. She is the only one who would pin her future on a man. If one is unreliable, replace it with the next one. That's ridiculous. The moment the plane landed, I felt like I was still floating in the air. After spending the first week in a daze, I finally overcame the jet lag. Apart from eating and sleeping, every day there are endless classes. It was half a year later when I received the letter from the professor. I didn't inform anyone when I left. It was only after Michael didn't see me for a month that he realized something was wrong. He went to the school to look for me and found out that I had gone abroad to study. The professor criticized me in the letter, saying that I shouldn't have kept such a big thing a secret from my family. Let me write a letter back as soon as possible to report my safety. I didn't reply. I have no relatives there, and no one is expecting a reply from me. After that, I would receive letters from Michael every 6 months. At first he would simply chat about family matters, but later, probably realizing that my relationship with Bella's family was not as good as he thought, he stopped and started talking about his own affairs. Michael said that he has not married Bella yet. For some reason, he always felt that things shouldn't turn out this way. I said I would wait for me. I burned the letter. I will never have anything to do with him again in this life. I know you two have just gotten married and are inseparable, but I believe it. It was not until the first New Year after returning to China that I learned about Michael's recent situation from my professor. He and Bella are still not married. The two of them quarreled and made a scene every day, and several times they even reached the gate of the military unit. The position that was originally to be promoted was also withdrawn. Nowadays, 1 month's salary is barely enough to support a family, let alone yourself. Bella was also too ambitious but lacked the skills to succeed. Her mother found her several jobs, but she refused to do them because the pay was too little and the work was too much. In the end, she had no choice but to send Carol back to Tony's family on time every month in order to get some child support. Bella's parents tried to persuade them to get married more than once, but Michael refused to give in. Michael was cornered and said that his job was ruined now and he was not afraid of her making a fuss. The professor said, shaking his head. I thought Michael was reliable at first, but I didn't expect him to be so unreliable. Fortunately, you ran away in time. I smiled and nodded. It's better to rely on yourself than on anyone else. 3 years later, when I was involved in the design of a train station, the guard delivered a letter. There were only 3 words on the letter: I'm sorry. I know who it is. But it is no longer necessary.